How have the Eagles done it, Chris Landry? How have they gotten to 6-0 and better than even an optimistic Eagle guy like myself could have realistically expected? Football Friday here on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald hanging with you. We have one of our favorite guests jumping aboard with us. So it'd be great for the bye week because we can talk about things across the league. Our buddy Chris Landry from LandryFootball.com, where you find his podcast, Landry Football as well. Former NFL scout coach, do-it-all guy, good enough to hop in with us today. All right, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Landry, put your scouting cap on first. San Francisco acquired Christian McCaffrey last night for a second, a third, or fourth, future fifth. How does his game, assuming health, which is a big assumption with Christian McCaffrey, when he's up to speed, couple weeks, whatever, how do his skills play into the 49ers Shanahan offense?
Very well. You're dealing with one of the creative minds. You look at how Kyle has been able to feature a Kittle, feature a Deebo Samuel. This is another big weapon in the run game, in the pass game. This gives them another big weapon. Big if, though, you mentioned it. Can he stay healthy? He's not been able to do that. Look, it's a big time weapon. If he's healthy down the stretch, this team will be more difficult to defend offensively with him in the game. There's no question about that.
Yeah, you've done it from every different angle around this league, Chris. When you talk about the trade deadline, there's sort of these two schools of thought that, obviously football isn't like baseball. You could just plug somebody in the lineup. It's not a plug and play sport in general. On the other hand, there are certain positions that you can get guys up to speed a little bit quicker. Running back, probably one of them. But then again, Christian's rare in that he can do everything, right? I remember back when he was coming out, people would say he'd run the best routes he ran better routes than receivers. So he's involved in other aspects, all aspects of the offense. And Kyle's got one of the more complicated offenses in the NFL. How does that all factor into it?
Well, what he does, though, and it's complex, but what he does, he features guys very well. So he can compress the learning to really fit the player. And the Christian understands route concepts. He understands, green dogs and understanding how to release. He gets all of that. So what they're going to do with him is obviously work within his strengths, which is varied. So what I see is formation variations. I see him lining up in different spots. Well, he's used to doing that. So that's going to work very well. I think the biggest thing, though, and Jody mentioned it, is health, because we think about health in terms of, well, when is he going to be ready for Sunday? It's about practice. It's about repping it. It's about getting the timing. So it's health in practice. I know practice is not something that people pay attention to because it's not something they're exposed to, but how you practice is how you play. So you can't run certain things. You can't put things in a playbook if you haven't practiced it enough, because then that's where the mistakes are made. It's not about scheme, but how well you execute any certain scheme, formation, route, run play. Listen, I think Kyle does, as I said, he features guys well. So I think it's going to work very well, provided he's healthy and he can get the work. We're dealing with a guy that's 8 years into the league. He's seen everything, done everything. He's been utilized in a lot of different directions. So it won't, and he's very bright. So Christian will be able to handle that. The only thing you would question, and this is not on the table for San Francisco, is, they put a lot of picks on the table for a guy that is in his 8th year and has not been healthy. So I don't know that we look at this as, depending on his health, how long he's going to play, and so I don't know that down the road this makes the Niners better when you reduce all the picks, but they've got a couple of picks, remember, for losing a couple of coaches. So look, they're in a win now mode, and there's very few teams, we'll get into it, very few teams in the NFC that are distinguishing themselves as being special. And so this move was clearly, what can we do to put us over the top? Because when they're healthy, this Niner defense is really good. Now they're down a defensive end, a defensive tackle, an inside backer, an outside backer, and a safety and a corner. They're down one player in every position. So other than that, the health is fine. That was a big problem last week. Healthy, this is a really good defense. And we know what their quarterback situation is and what they've been able to do with that quarterback. This has given them another weapon. Now you got Debo and you got McCaffrey. If they're both healthy and playing, that is not going to be fun trying to defend that with the way Kyle runs it, with his condensed sets. And it just is going to become interesting to watch. This makes them, a bigger player. I thought they were the team to beat in the West by default. I think they're one of the teams now in the NFC that we got to watch, provided they get healthy. Folks, we know this. Thanksgiving on, who's healthy, man? Tell me who's healthy. I'll tell you who's going to get on a run.
All right, before we get to Thanksgiving, 10 days from now is the trade deadline. And as John correctly pointed out, football a little different than baseball and NBA and NHL. The plug-and-play aspect, that much more difficult. But they've done a nice job in the NFL. They've continued to push the trade deadline back. It used to be in the end of September, which you couldn't even decide if you were good enough to make the playoffs.
Right.
But you got to make your decision now because the trade deadline's hitting. So give the NFL credit for it. You tell me. I know in other sports, somebody makes a deal leading up to trade. The team almost goes into panic mode. We have to respond. They made a deal, so we need to make a deal. They upgraded. We need to upgrade. Will the McCaffrey deal have the domino effect? Will there be more deals because of it with other teams?
I don't think so. You got to be in the mix. Now, and I also think what's made it a little bit more flavor of the month is look what the Rams did, and it had an impact with them positively. So I think it's the teams that are close that are missing a piece. There was some talk. I know Buffalo kicked the tires and thought about McCaffrey as well. And, for the same reason, they're a contending team, but they're really good and they're thinking about the future as well. I think there are very few teams that are really trade players, meaning they're going to be in the mix to try to make a trade. Are they the right guys that you can bring in? You've got the salary cap, the contract, and you guys have just mentioned it very well. What's the position? What system does he come from? How long is he going to take to acclimate? You can't just plug in somebody in football like you do, in baseball, and the fifth in the lineup and play third base. It's not the same. So It's much more complex. You're not going to see a lot of it. I'm not saying that you're not going to see a few. We saw Deion Jones get moved a couple of weeks ago. I think we could see it, but I don't think football is as conducive to trades because of the complexity of the sport. And, you go from one system to another. Well, it takes a whole off season, and it takes to maybe end of October for somebody that you sign in the off season to finally get in rhythm. You're certainly not going to have the impact for the rest of the season. And if you're giving up picks, which is what you're doing, you're giving up your future. And this is a more volatile sport where the draft picks are more and more important because that's the only quality guys that you get on a real bargain basement level. So it's just not real conducive to trade, except for rare circumstances. A missing piece, a team that's clearly in the mix to go for it. I mean, we can eliminate a whole bunch of teams. Why would you make a move for if you want any one of those? What's it going to do for you? Unless it's a move that somebody that you've got a good contract and that he's going to be a building block for your future. It just doesn't fit in many cases. So we'll have some trades, but it won't be a lot, and it won't be as big as this, I don't think.
I want to talk about the self-evaluation aspect of it, Chris, because you mentioned there's not a lot of teams in a position to say, all right, we're realistic contenders. And, I think San Francisco is one of them that can say that, even though they haven't gotten off to the start they wanted to, even though they lost their quarterback. They've made deep runs in the past with Jimmy Garoppolo, as you mentioned. New Orleans, because we talk about it here in Philadelphia in the trade, they've given up the first round pick. It stands. The Eagles are 6-0. if the draft was today, and it's not, but if it was today, they'd have the number 4 overall pick. And I think one of the things is that Mickey Loomis didn't self-evaluate well. He loses a potential Hall of Fame coach in the recent past. He loses a Hall of Fame quarterback in the recent past, yet they still thought they were contenders. How difficult is it to be honest with yourself in the NFL and admit where you are?
I don't think it's very difficult. Some people just don't do it very well. I mean, like, for example, you mentioned in New Orleans, Mickey Loomis is not a football guy. And so that trade doesn't get made if Sean Payton's still there, and Dennis Allen, who didn't want to make that move, Sean Payton ran that organization. He made the picks and he was good enough with letting Mickey get his credit and all that. But the decisions, all the football decisions ran through him. Well, Dennis doesn't have that clout. And, obviously, CJ is missed because of all the injuries they've had. And, that's the thing you have to look at. You have to look at, particularly, say, in the secondary. That's great. We've got 6 healthy guys, and we like what we have now. But it's a long season. What happens if? And you got to see through that and look at it. I think the issue with them, and this is, again, Mickey's decision, they didn't feel like they were going to be able to sign him. They thought, that was good, CJ at the end of this year. So they just said, we're going to get something for him now because he's going to be gone at the end of the year. And, so look, I just think that's kind of where you kind of go with certain decisions that you make. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, I think to me, you have to look at your team. I was always reticent to do it because the picks were like gold to me because it represents players. And if you do a good job in the draft, those picks are really, really valuable. So even the good teams, if you're in good position and you're good enough, like say Buffalo, they didn't think it was worth pulling the trigger on a trade like this. San Francisco, they're kind of, they're in the mix of the NFC. They're maybe behind, and we haven't gotten to talk about it, behind like a Philly and maybe, they're in the mix. They're close to, but what can they do to jump on top? If you're in the AFC and you're a playoff caliber team, I mean, you got to seriously look at it. If I'm, a team in the AFC South and am I going to make a move? Is one player or 2 players are going to put me over the top of Buffalo and Kansas City? No, I need to be smart about what I'm doing here.
Understood. All right. On a week where the Eagles are self-scouting, I need Chris Landry to scout the Philadelphia Eagles. We're pretty optimistic here in Philadelphia. We're optimistic before the season started. I don't know that anybody saw 6-0, and not only 6-0, but no one else in the league really who were 5-1 other than Buffalo really say it. Yeah, and we're right there with the Eagles, or the Eagles are right there with us. So they've, at least maybe I should only speak for myself, my expectations, they've overachieved. How have the Eagles done it, Chris Landry? How have they gotten to 6-0 and better than even an optimistic Eagle guy like myself could have realistically expected?
Well, I know in the preseason, when I was on, this is a surprise to me because I like the roster. I like the depth. But I said it clearly. I didn't see anybody in the NFC East that I thought was going to go really like a deep playoff threat. And here I am clearly wrong because there are 2 teams that are really good. And the Eagles, I think are the better of the 2. Dallas with their defense. And I'm going to start with the defense because I think if you look at the teams in the NFC who are good enough defensively, well, the Eagles, the Cowboys, San Francisco when healthy, Minnesota plays pretty good defense, but it's a little different, and I don't know, and they've got good receiver weapons, but I wouldn't put them in the category. They're not a lot. I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of just here or there a given week. So I think it's start with the defense. I think they have been very, very good. I think they've been very sound on all 3 levels. Love their corners. I mean, so the ability to cover, the ability to match up is there that's better than most people has in the league right now. Offensively, and then I think up front, obviously, I mean, you stay there. They're very good up front, and they're very good in the back end. And when you have that, that's a great starting point. Offensively, what I like about what they're doing is their balance. This is a run offense. It's got a lot of RPO based. It's very difficult to, there's a lot of things that slow down even good pass rushes because you have to defend the run first. And that creates a lot of spacing and coverage. You've got Jalen Hurts playing well with improved receiver weapons. I think this scheme and its style and its all the eye manipulation that they do with the defenses, it makes the offensive line even better. So I like the overall balance. They're a really good team. I think they're deep. I think they've got answers in most games for how to beat you because of it. And, I just think they're just a really solid, good football team that's solid in every areas. And, I think they're the team to beat in the East. And, certainly one of the teams, one of the teams on the short list in the NFC. Are they as explosive as do I think at full health? Do I think Buffalo and Kansas City are better? I do. But let's just start where, you put them in that class. That's saying a whole lot. And I did not think that coming into the season. And it's no disrespect to the personnel that they have, but the way it's come together is the thing that surprised me. I understood the personnel going into the season, but how they've utilized it, how they've managed it, it's been better than what I could have expected. And quite frankly, I want to give kudos. No, it's not popular in Philly, but I got to give kudos to Dallas because when Dak went down, I thought that is it. I mean, they have done a really good job of, but you know what they've done is run the football, play good defense, and they're not asking the quarterback to put the game on its back, and that's what they need to do with Dak. And if they can do that with Dak, they can be better. But if they start, we're going to throw it 45 times a game, well, then they're going to drop a little bit. So I think they've done a good job. And we're talking great coaching. What a job Brian Daboll's done with the Giants. Phenomenal. I watch them all the time, and I'm saying that is the team. They get it. The first step to winning football games is to learn how to not lose it. The Giants don't make the mistakes. They protect the football. They play smarter football than their opponents. And, it's not like when you break down the tape, it jumps out and I say, man, this Giants team got a lot. They've got some answers. They don't have as many. And I keep thinking it's going to run out at some point. And I think it will as it relates. But you know what? Couple of more weeks, and they're on their way to making a run to at least be a playoff team with this extra team now that we have the past couple of years. So, man, kudos to the NFC East. We'll leave Washington out the conversation, but those three teams are really playing well for different reasons. And if you look at it overall, the North, Minnesota, the Green Bay's got their problems. You look at the South, the Bucs have been a huge disappointment. You still can't count them out if they get healthy, but nobody there. Atlanta's done the best job of playing, up to their capabilities, and they're not very good, and that's partly because of the division. And then the West, it's San Francisco, because the Rams have all sorts of problems with injuries. I know the Niners do too, but so you're looking at, maybe a Minnesota, which I'm not buying. San Francisco, the Eagles, and we'll see if Dallas can do it. That's to me it right now. And I don't see anybody getting on that type of run. So it's a very short list of teams that I think that are capable in the NFC.
Kudos to you, Chris, because that's where I was going. Who could upset the apple cart for the Eagles in the NFC? I personally do not. Jody knows this. I do not believe in the Vikings. I give Kevin O'Connell credit getting 5-1, similar to Brian Daboll, as you were talking about, done a phenomenal job to get that team to 5-1. I'm not buying the Giants. The Cowboys, though, being able to persevere with Cooper Rush at quarterback and still be standing, and they're 4-2. if Dak Prescott, as you mentioned, can get back and they're playing good football because of that defense, I think they are the biggest threat to the Eagles in the NFC. If it's not San Francisco, there's a lot of moving parts. McCaffrey's got to fit in. You mentioned all the injuries. I loved him before the season, but I thought Trey Lance was going to be a little bit of an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo. Now they're back to Jimmy. The Cowboys are the one team, and you're right, it's not going to go over well for me either here in Philadelphia. The Cowboys are the one team that still makes me a little bit unsettled if they can figure things out.
They could be better offensively. Again, if they continue to work the running game and they get some playmaking ability from Dak, they could be better. Now, the matchup with Dallas and Philly is a good matchup for Philly, because the thing that makes Dallas really, really good is their pass rush. And with Philly, their ability to run the football, and that limits Cowboys' ability to tee off in the pass game, because the Eagles are not a drop back team. They're like, again, an RPO base. So they have to defend the run. Dallas has to defend the run first against Philly, and that slows down their ability to tee off. So I think you saw in stretches the other night, they get some pressure and they got back in the game, Dallas did. But sustainability, it takes what Dallas does the best, and to some degree, Philly can neutralize that. So I do give Philly an edge, but, it's a long season and we don't know the health, and I do give Philly an edge too with their depth, because I don't think Dallas, they're not as deep, and they've never been all that deep. They allocate money a little bit differently. So look, I agree with you. I think it's Dallas. I think it's San Francisco. That's really the only teams. Minnesota personnel wise is good, but I don't, they're not playing well. They haven't clicked, and I just don't, they're winning games, but I think it's San Francisco and I think it's Dallas. I think that's the only two teams right now. And I don't see a team that's going to be able to kick it a notch. And yet, what's really interesting with such a scarcity of teams is, what if something bad happens to two or three of those teams? Then it opens up to, like, man, it's just, you don't know where it's going to It's like, just you mediocre teams just come on and we'll see what happens. And you could have one of those years like I don't see the year the Cardinals got healthy with Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald. They were a team that was didn't play well during the season. And remember, they just got in and then they finally clicked. I don't see that type of team that's emerging that's, hey, this team's really, really good, but they just don't have it together. I mean, that team might be, in some people's eyes, the Rams, which won it last year, but they are just so decimated on the offensive line. I just don't see them being able to fix it enough to make that run, but we'll see.
All right. Oh, by the way, both of you Cowboy fans, they could be 4-3 by the end of this weekend. Beware the well-rested Lions going into Jerry's den this week. Just say it. Just say it. We shall see. If you go to Chris's website, LandryFootball.com, you see all the great content. He's got podcasts and scouting stuff from the NFL and plenty on the college side. And since we brought it up earlier, the Eagles right now would have the number 4 pick in the draft. New Orleans pick would be number 4. A lot of football to be played yet. That pick could go up. It could go down. Give us the rankings, the kind of guys, the names who are going to be there at like 4, 5, and 6 in this year's draft, Chris.
Well, I think, there are a couple of things. Will Anderson's still going to go high, despite the fact that he's not played his best football at this point. He's still going to be an elite player in 1 or 2. The quarterback, the reason I'm bringing him up is because the quarterbacks are going to be a player early. And so you may have a guy like that slip, a guy like Jalen Carter from Georgia's. They've already got that type of guy in Philly. So that's not going to happen. I think there's going to be, a Brian Breezy. I think outstanding at Clemson. I think you've got a number of receivers that I think are going to go relatively high, but it's still pretty early because a lot of those guys, some of them have had some injuries or slow starts. So it's really too early there, because in the process of evaluating, just so much left to go, because even though we're halfway through the college season, somebody like myself that does consulting work for teams, I'm grinding tape, day in and day out. But I can't watch every game of every player yet, because it's like running on a treadmill. You can run, but you can't go anywhere. But when the season ends, people say, well, the season's over. How can guys move? Because you're watching tape. You can watch all the tape at the end of the year. Yeah. You can watch. It takes you until March and to get through all the 12 games and bowl games. So there's some really good players. Look, there's going to be a really good player there. And the good thing about it is they feel they have the quarterback. There's going to be a playmaker on offense. I think there'll be some good tackles, but I think the offensive tackles are going to be maybe a little bit more valued in the middle, not as high, but we'll see. I think there'll be an impact defensive player. So I think it's rub your hands and say you're in good position if you end up regardless where you end up. It may not be 4, but it's going to be pretty high, and you're going to get a really good player there if you feel it.
Yeah. And CJ or Bryce, who you got ahead right now?
Well, CJ's got Bryce. To me is an intriguing guy. I think he's got tremendous intangibles. I think he's got playmaking ability. I think he's got ice water in his veins. CJ's got a little bit more upside there. Will Levis will be in the conversation. He's very talented at Kentucky. I think you'll see those guys go very, very high. But I think CJ's got a little bit more size. I worry about Bryce like I worried about Tua. I worry about size in the frame. People have, said, well, how does Bryce compare to, say, Russell Wilson? Well, Russell, they don't. They're both short, but Russell Wilson is very lower truncated in the body. Bryce is a little thin. He's more like Tua in that regard. But I can tell you, he is special. He is the guy that you want in pressure moments, leading you. He just can he stay healthy? He's going to go high. He's got underrated ability to move and slide and then run around the pocket and make plays. I mean, he does things on the college level that remind you of Johnny Manziel making plays, but with really good work ethic, really good intelligence, and really good ability to read defenses, whereas Johnny just created and made plays and was a knucklehead and kind of spoiled. You got Bryce Young, who is like a savant, just a guy that loves to work and learn the game and study the game, and kind of comes from a background where it was all football all the time. I still think he's going to be. Sounds
like Jalen Hurts. So is those Alabama guys.
Saban's great at getting those guys from Hurts and Tua, and Bryce Young, and Mac Jones in between.
Here's the difference: Jalen Hurts learned the passing game. The best move he ever made was the short time he spent at Oklahoma, because he learned the passing game concepts that was the development time that lessened his development time with the Eagles. If he doesn't have that, it's a big with Bryce. Bryce has got it from day one. He's got it from high school in his system. Yeah. So if you think about it in terms of intangibles, Bryce is better than Jalen in that regard. But Jalen has got, he's thicker and he's stronger, and I think that time in Oklahoma has helped him a great deal, combined with the time in Alabama. That's just made a tremendous impact. And quite frankly, it's surprised me how quickly he has developed. But I give a lot of credit to Nick, and what they run is they run a lot of college style offense that fits Jalen very, very well. And it's very much Oklahoma-like, and it's a lot what Nick picked up. It's a lot of what some of the stuff
Lincoln Riley. Yep. Eagles love Lincoln Riley, by the way. Yeah.
If you are any kind of football fan, you got to check out his website, LandryFootball.com, his podcast, all his scouting stuff. And we're going to get him back here for about every month or so, because
we didn't even talk about his Jets, John.
Yeah.
Have you heard about
It's
that?
Spurs
How about the
365.
Jets?
I know.
I'll call you this afternoon, and you and I
Yeah.
can talk Jets for half an hour.
Yeah.
Larry.
Good.
That
I
would
love
not
it.
be a problem.
How about that? New York. That's great. New York.
New York
Philly,
football's
it's great.
That's That's
New York
good.
football's
Finally.
back.
Yeah.
I mean, even got Syracuse 5-0. Or
Ooh,
6-0,
that's
excuse
right,
me,
the
until tomorrow probably. But we'll leave that alone. We'll leave that
Chris, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for doing it. Like I said, we'll reach out about a month from now. Always great whenever you come on. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, thanks. Well, what does that say? Fly, Eagles, fly. Continue to fly. Great job, guys. Great to be with you. Take care.